Today, we are diving into the high-stakes journey of the world's energy. We're going to uncover the fragile pathways that, believe it or not, keep our entire modern world powered. So, let's get right into it.
So how does all that energy get to us? We flip a switch, we fill up our cars, and we just kind of take it for granted. But behind that simple convenience lies this massive, sprawling, global network. And, well, that network has some alarmingly fragile points.
To really get a grip on the risk here, we first need to understand the system itself. So let's start with what we can call the world's energy arteries.
These energy pathways, they're basically the planet's circulatory system for power. We're talking pipelines that stretch across entire continents and massive supertankers that navigate the vast oceans. They are the essential bridge between where energy is found and where we all desperately need it. And without that bridge, the source might as well not even exist.
This metaphor is just perfect. If you think about oil and gas as the lifeblood of the global economy, then these pathways are the arteries. And just like in our own bodies, a single blockage in one of those arteries can have absolutely catastrophic system-wide effects.
But here's the catch. Not all parts of this system are created equal. Some of these arteries are way narrower and much more vulnerable than others. And these are what we call the choke points.
A choke point is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a geographic bottleneck where an immense amount of energy is forced to squeeze through a tiny passage. And because so much is concentrated in one little area, a single disruption, whether that's political turmoil, military action, or even just a simple accident, can send massive shockwaves through the entire global economy.
To really get a sense of the scale of this vulnerability, I want you to just think about one number: 20%. What on earth could that possibly represent in our global energy system? Well, that 20% represents 1/5 of all the oil the entire world consumes every single day. All of it has to navigate through just one single, narrow maritime passage. That just goes to show how incredibly dependent our entire energy supply is on a tiny handful of these fragile bottlenecks.
All right, so let's get specific. We're going to zoom in on 3 of the most critical, most important energy choke points on the planet right now.
Our first stop is probably the most famous, and maybe the most volatile energy choke point in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. It's that critical link between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean.
The numbers here are just staggering. We're talking somewhere between 17 and 20 million barrels of oil passing through this tiny strait every single day. Major producers like Saudi Arabia and Iraq, they have almost no other way to get their product to the global market. And get this, at its narrowest point, this absolutely vital artery is only 33 kilometers wide.
And the risks here are immense. The whole region is a hotbed of political tension. We hear threats to close the strait, and we've actually seen incidents where tankers have been seized. Even just the possibility of a disruption here is enough to send global oil prices soaring.
Okay. Moving southwest on our map, we get to our second critical choke point, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is the one that links the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden.
Now, the volume here is smaller than Hormuz, but don't let that fool you. 6 to 7 million barrels of oil a day is still a staggering amount. This is an absolutely vital artery for trade moving between Europe and Asia.
The dangers here are very different, but they're just as serious. The ongoing conflict in nearby Yemen has created a highly unstable environment, and that's led to direct attacks on commercial shipping vessels. If this route were ever blocked, ships would be forced to take a much longer and more expensive journey all the way around Africa. All right, for our final case study, we're heading to Southeast Asia, to one of the busiest shipping lanes in the entire world, the Strait of Malacca.
And here, the picture gets even bigger. This isn't just about oil anymore. A full quarter of all goods traded globally passes through this one single strait. That includes the vast amounts of energy needed to power massive Asian economies like China and Japan.
So the main risks here are less about geopolitics and more about logistics. The strait is incredibly narrow and just packed with ships, which dramatically increases the risk of accidents and collisions. And on top of all that, it's historically been a major hotspot for piracy.
So let's quickly put them side by side. You've got Hormuz with its massive volume and huge political risk. Then there's Bab el-Mandeb, threatened by active regional conflict. And finally, Malacca, a critical hub defined by just sheer congestion and the constant threat of piracy.
So 3 very different places, 3 very different kinds of threats, but they all share that one fundamental vulnerability.
So what does this all mean when we zoom back out? Well, it means we're dealing with a system that is both deeply interconnected and, frankly, deeply fragile.
This really brings us to the core takeaway here. Having access to energy resources, well, that's simply not enough. You have to be able to transport them reliably and safely from point A to point B. When it comes to energy security, the journey is everything.
You know, this quote from our source material really just says it all. The world can have all the oil and gas it needs, but if the routes to get it to market are blocked, that availability means very little.
And this all brings us to our final thought. Our reliance on these pathways is only growing as we find energy sources further and further away from where we actually use them. So I'll leave you with this question. As our world becomes more and more connected, is our energy system actually getting stronger and more resilient, or is it just creating more points of failure, making the whole thing more fragile than ever?